Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the Mystical Living Podcast. I'm Katie Soul, and I am so delighted to share the beautiful guests that we have today. But first, I wanted to share an offer that we have for all of our podcast listeners. We've recently launched the Mystical Living Group Program. It's for women who are ready to make accelerated changes in their lives. And in 8 weeks, we go through shedding what no longer serves you to stepping into your true purpose and living out your dream life. We'd be delighted to have you join us in the program. Our first cohort has kicked off, and they're having the most incredible results. We have a special code for you. Podcast is the code for 30% off the Mystical Living Group program, and we'll put that in the show notes. Without further ado, I am so excited to welcome Sarah Tacy onto the podcast today. I love to describe Sarah as a warm cup of rose tea, and I've made a little warm cup of rose tea to delight in this conversation with her today. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Katie. I'm so happy to be here with you, and I am so happy to be here with all of your listeners. Thank you for having me, and I know that everyone's time is their most precious resource, so thank you for tuning in with us.
Yes, thank you so much. So before we take that elevator ride down from the mind to the heart, Sarah, will you share with us who you are really?
Yeah, I would say that I help people journey into self-liberation and that I will be on my own path for that for the rest of my life as well. I don't
Same.
think there's an end point. Um, and I do this through somatic exploration, embodiment of spirit. I have worked with professional athletes and CEOs and people going into and out of surgeries and people more recently who are looking to resolve old patterns in their nervous system that come from trauma imprints or simply survival habits that no longer serve them, and they're ready to upgrade and they're ready to update so that they can live a life that is more in alignment with the core of who they are and who they are being called to be.
So beautiful. I know this episode is going to help so many people. Your medicine in the nervous system, somatics, and really grounding into this earthly experience. Oh, something's binging in my house. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's like a confirmation sign from the angels. So
I heard it.
beautiful. You heard it?
I did. It was like an angelic chime that came in when you
Chime going on.
confirmed my being. Thank you.
Whew. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. We will receive that. Sarah is going to take us into a journey from the mind where that human self resides and into our heart where our divine self resides so that we can ground and really be present for this episode together. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah for this drop in.
Thank you. And I'm going to be a little bit of a rebel here and break the rules.
Yeah.
Yesterday, when Katie mentioned that this might be an option at the beginning, and Katie, I don't know if you know that you did this, that you slid in, you're like down to the heart or into the body.
Yes, I
You said
did.
into the body. I was like, oh, that's my jam.
Mm-hmm.
Because depending on who you work with, if you were to work with Mama Gina, she'd say like, come on down to your clitoris, come on down to your pussy. And that is where you're going to find your hell yes or your absolute no. And other people are going to find it in their heart, and some people are going to find it in their stomach. Yeah. And so I am guessing that many of your listeners find it in their heart, and that is why they are drawn to you. And I am just going to offer some options of finding a place in their body that feels stable, that they can lean into as they're listening to our conversation. And so before we even entertain the idea of slowing down I might ask you to notice if there's any part of your body that would love to just like shake a little. So for me, I'm just shaking my hands, and I'm going to see if my shoulders want to come in my head and my feet are going up and down a little bit. And just seeing if there's any energy that wants to emote. Like we might have emotions in us that want to emote, that say, hell no, I don't want to slow down. And that's cool. So we give them a chance to just move a little bit. And when that begins to naturally taper, so for me, as mine tapers, I notice I kind of move into a little bit of a sway.
Yeah.
And then, wow. And then when I do that, my experiences, and the listeners, you get to see what your experience is. My experience is I begin to sense the energy in my body. So I just notice like a little tingling and pulsation in my hands, even my face. And I would invite you to notice anything that feels supportive. Maybe it's the ground beneath your feet. If you're seated, the chair beneath you. And if you're human, then the breath within you. So that even parts of us that are moving could offer stability in their consistency. The breath will always be with us as long as we are embodied. So without having to change it or alter, just noticing that you have a breath. And if it's okay to even notice that you have a body. And as you tune in with your body, for some people, there may be a freeze in certain parts of their body or their heart or their sexual centers. And other people may be vibrating and alive in any of those sections. So tuning into your body and seeing, is there any section of your body that would be available today? It might be a bone, it might be a thigh bone. And just knowing that your mind is non-local. And so no matter where you choose in your body, there's intelligence, there's accompaniment, and perhaps you place your hand on that part of your body and thank it for allowing you to see it. And I'm feeling pulled to also say that now that your hand is on that part of your body, we just see if there's room for our other hand to come to our heart. So for me, it's a yes. And for me, it feels so good that in my body, I have my left hand on my left thigh feeling stable. My right hand to my heart. And your heart may have said, no, not today. So great. So great that your heart has an opinion and that you get to listen. You get to build trust. And we could ask ourselves in this moment, is there any message that you have for us, dear heart or dear stable part? And then for the sake of time in the podcast, I'm just going to take a nice deep inhale and an exhale. And I notice a sense of gratitude just for Katie offering us this opportunity to slow down to the pace of our bodies, the pace of nature, and perhaps even the pace in which the mystical can begin to commune with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-mm.
Wow. What a gift to just have that moment to drop into the body as you can feel the frequency shift in our recording, the shift in the energy. And for our listeners, I know you too can feel the shift in your bodies. And what was so interesting for me is I was called to place my hand over my right hip flexor.
Yeah.
That was an area that I had a lot of pain in for many years, decades even. And it's not an area of my body I've thought about for a long time because I've been pain free. I
Mm.
think sometimes when we're pain free, we don't give the same attention to a part of us. And it just brought up this concept, was not on my mind to talk about today, but is flowing through, is the experiences that we have when we're in pain and when we're in wholeness.
Mm.
And I would love for you to talk a little bit about how do we ride that wave and how have you ridden that wave in your own life?
Yeah, there's one thing I want to touch on, and then I want to come back to your question. And I remember being very pregnant, and I had been a teacher, yoga teacher, for about 15 years at that point. And I remember doing, and I know I did this in class too anyway, but in the beginning of my prenatal yoga video, I have us seated, or maybe it's like in the middle, and just rubbing our own leg, and just
Mm,
so much. Like, how many times people have said, like, I've never looked at my toes until you get into a yoga class and you start, and then there's just like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you,
oh,
thank you, thank you. And I think about a mother. So I could think
mm,
about your hip as like a mother as well. And I can think about how often her work goes unseen and she'll do it anyway.
mm,
And so, how amazing if we can bring attention and gratitude to amplify and to send love to the parts that aren't screaming out for help, but could
yeah,
still use the appreciation. And how
totally.
it's so true that we forget to appreciate until there's
Yeah,
pain.
yeah,
And then we're just like, we'll do anything if you'll just go back to the silent version, to the version that didn't make the sounds. But what
right.
if in our health we could tune into parts of our body even when they were well, and we could appreciate them
Mm,
even when they were well?
yeah,
And so much of even tuning into a breath at the beginning of a practice is not because the breath is
mm,
wrong. We just get to appreciate and amplify, similar to looking out to nature. Um, I'm having this vision of feet right now. So before I answer your other question, I'm going to geek out over the feet for a second. Maybe your
please geek out
listeners.
over the feet.
Okay. Yeah. Like
I
maybe
mean,
the
I think the
listeners.
feet are so cool, but just because there's a point on our feet connected to every single point on our body. So yes, let's
Yes.
just geek out on the
Okay.
feet.
So we could start there, right? That with reflexology, there's a point on your foot, same with your ear and your tongue and your hands, but there's a point on your foot that connects to every part of your body. Of the 12 main meridians, six of them are in the feet, like six of them. Three of them begin in the feet, three of them end in the feet. The kidney meridian, I am not an acupuncture specialist, so I don't want to play one here or pretend I am, but I do know that the kidney one is down at the ball of the foot, and it's like this yin energy of,
Mm,
drinking from the earth. But if I were to tap more into my specialty, would be there are 26 bones in each foot.
mm,
Collectively, your feet have over a quarter of the bones in the body, which means they're supposed to move. It means they're supposed to shift to the earth beneath them. And when we bind them up, then everything falls into the joints going above. And I guess I don't have to get too much into that, just to say that there are times that when I'm doing yoga or when I'm stretching or when I'm slowing down and I actually pay attention to my feet, I get to see the miracle of them, instead of in our country it's like shove them into these shoes, or
I
people
know.
who are like, feet stink or whatever. Just like, the more
Yeah.
we appreciate the things that are often unseen, the more resourced we become.
Oh gosh.
And there are just miracles happening all over our body all the time. and so much intelligence, physiologically, energetically, emotionally, all the time. I wasn't planning on going there, but here we
I mean,
are.
that's the magic of these conversations and every conversation you and I have, whether it be recorded or not, just
Yeah.
the absolute divine flow is where the co-creation and the magic happens. So it's perfect.
And if
Absolutely
I were to
perfect.
answer the question you had
Mm,
before that, I'm
yeah.
not sure I fully comprehended. The part I heard was about when we're, when we're in flow or we're not in flow, but could you repeat the question as to like, yeah, the essence of what you wanted me
Yeah.
to answer
What
about the
was coming up? And I think in many ways you did answer it
Okay.
through your response, but it was that spectrum from pain to wholeness and how we often give our attention to the pain or to the part of us or to the person in our life that's screaming the loudest.
Oh, so interesting. So I have some
Yeah.
thoughts on pain too, because
Mm,
I think I answered what about wholeness? And I think we often think of wholeness as like elation and joy, but we were talking about like we were talking about neutral. Like
yeah.
what happens when something is whole and it's neutral and we don't even notice it?
Yeah.
And then if
Like
we
my
talk
hip.
Yeah, exactly. And then if we talk about pain, I don't think the issue necessarily is that we need to take our attention away from pain. I
Mm,
think it's
I
being
agree.
more honest and more like to bow down to it in the way that we bow
Mm,
down to wholeness or to neutral.
thank you.
Um, in the work that I do, we might first find something that's stable in the body, and then we might take a moment to tap into, oh, where is there a place that feels some challenge? And we would treat that place like a young child who
Yeah.
whose needs have not been met, who's having a hard
Mm,
time, and we wouldn't label it and
yeah.
we wouldn't dismiss it. We wouldn't wish it to be other than it is, which I
Mm,
think is what we generally do with pain. Like, how do I fix this? How do I change it from what it is? We would
totally.
come next to it like a really stable, loving parent
Yeah.
and say, like, tell me about yourself.
Mm,
What are there any needs that haven't been met? Are there any messages that you have for me? And I really understand that when you're in extreme pain, it's very hard to be this stable within yourself. So also giving full honor to that,
yeah.
which is when you have stable people around you hopefully show up to say, how can I support you? How can I be with you? But I'm so curious about the process of healing in which we really are looking. We're looking for a three-way dynamic in which you have the person experiencing the pain
Yeah.
asking themselves questions, listening to their bodies, and then you're listening for the divine. So this could be like, how does mystical living come in? Is that all the people I worked with, especially when I was doing yoga therapeutics, where we're working really with people with chronic pain and anxiety, people who had lived in pain clinics, people who had had the surgeries, people who
Mm,
had been to the best doctors in the world, people who had been told, this is it. We've done all we
mm,
can. This is the pain you'll have. And when I would go in and when I do go in to work with people, the question that we start asking questions. Oh, when does this show up? Oh, that's so interesting. When your mother-in-law comes, it amplifies. And so then we might look at like what things are causing inflammation in the body, which can happen emotionally. It can happen energetically. It can happen with food. It can happen with not enough space and support within the physiology. And we start asking questions and we also start listening to the wisdom of the body.
yeah.
And I always felt like I could work with anybody because I knew it wasn't on me to figure it out. I knew
Yeah.
that there was a three-way relationship with the wisdom that flows through the body, or
Yeah.
perhaps into my intuition, the wisdom I had accumulated through experience, and the person themselves. And so there was this three-way element always happening. Uh, and I know I got a little off the idea of pain, but I think I'm also speaking to whether we're in pain physically or mentally,
Yeah.
can we accompany it as we would accompany a child who really needs love and needs someone to say, I will stay with you. And the more that we say, I will stay with you as you are, you don't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
That's when energy starts flowing. That's when that biodynamic rhythm,
Yeah.
natural healing process starts happening.
Hmm.
Yeah.
One thing that was pinging in for me this morning, and we've been corresponding. I maybe haven't put these words to it, but we've been corresponding on this topic. I like to call it external validation versus internal nourishment. And so often, we seek wholeness within something outside of ourselves, whether it's a promotion or a raise or money or love from somebody else. And I would love for you to speak to, in the work you do and in your own practice, how do you internally nourish yourself so that you don't find yourself seeking that validation from
And
outside?
I'm going to rule break again and just say that I'm a both and.
Yeah. I mean, a
Yes.
little external validation is good too.
Yeah. Well, so what we call it in our practice is accurate reflection.
Ooh,
And I
beautiful.
find it to be super
I love
grounding.
that.
And so accurate reflection is when somebody listens to you and they see you, and maybe
Mhm.
they've even seen you over a period of time. And from the inside, you may be what we call looping
Mm.
and be having a hard time grounding in who you are. And so when a beloved
Mm.
or a mentor gives you
Yeah.
accurate reflection to say,
Mm.
of course you're looping. Of
Yeah.
course you're feeling pain. Or of course, like you are so freaking brilliant.
Mm.
You've got this. And I know you've got this. And let me bring up 20 other times in your life where you've had a similar challenge and you had this. In case you don't
Yeah.
remember, let me remind you of who you are.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying
Evidence.
external validation from a job, like you were saying, but I do think that accurate reflection is a
Mm.
beautiful thing. And I think
Love that.
opening up to the possibility that one could have that, like a listener could be listening right now and say, I've never experienced that. That's not possible.
Mm.
And so the earlier in life that we've experienced the imprint of that's not possible, the more unreal it seems. So you might hear
Mm.
me saying this and it's like, that's not possible. But if there's a little ping in your heart or a little in your
Mm.
body, maybe Sarah's telling the truth. Maybe she's experienced that. Maybe Katie's experienced that. That as soon as you begin opening your body up to that possibility, your reticular activating system in the brain and also just,
Yeah.
spirit and uh, quantum physics starts working on your behalf to bring you more
Yeah.
people into your life who can give you accurate reflection to remind you of the divine human you are. And I said divine and I said human. So to have
Yeah.
empathy for the human part and the human
Yeah.
journey. Now, for myself, to tune into myself, um, this is a lifetime practice.
Yeah.
I can find myself going into story really easily.
Mhm.
I meditate twice a day, and this is new because I would say I've always been meditate through movement. And so
Mhm.
now I actually sit 20 minutes a day in the morning and sometime in the afternoon or evening. And when I see myself going to outside stories, I bring myself back towards my central channel.
Mm.
Um, Going into nature, even though that sounds outside of me, going into nature helps me become more embodied because I start to tune into the pace of nature, which is the pace of the body, which is the pace of the heart, which is the pace of the soul. So getting outside, moving my body, the idea that emotions need to emote. And so when we work out or we walk, we can actually have really healthy daily fight or flight that are built in as like a pressure relief system so that
Mm.
it's not hard to come home to ourselves. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not as much of an effort because we're giving our bodies its natural needs that it has to emote and to move. And so I would say for me to come back to my center, there's movement, there's nature, there's meditation, and the accurate reflection I was talking about. And now I'll add in the layer that you've mentioned maybe twice, and in the card that you pulled for us today, which is the way that when we talk to people who are on a similar path, like a path of awakening, it's not unusual that we get to know ourselves even better and come back to ourselves. It's a way less of a comparison thing. It's not like, oh shoot, she's having this experience. And it's like, wow, now that she said that, I remember this piece in myself from when I was 2. And I remember this thing that this mentor said, and I remember this meditation I had, and they start weaving together to create a more full picture of myself. And so I'm going to say all of those things: accurate reflection, meaningful conversation, and then within the self, movement, meditation, nature.
Beautiful. So many similar practices to my way I internally nourish myself. And I wanted to share with everyone this card that I pulled is from the Magdalene Manifestation Cards by Daniel Rama Hoffman. And I pulled Magdalene Molecule, Power of Community. When 2 or more are gathered, magic happens. Co-create with others for rapid materialization. This was a really beautiful card for today and this weaving of conversation together.
Yeah.
And I would love, and at the end of the day, you know, we are all connected in this field of oneness. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more. You brought up the RAS, and I'd love for you to talk about what does that mean for people who are like, what are they talking about? Quantum physics, RAS, what is happening? Please enlighten everyone.
Yeah, so the reticular activating system is in the brainstem. And I think I got interested in this like back in 2007 or 8 when I was creating my first yoga anatomy course and just really getting deep into all parts of the multidimensional being. And the way I understood it then and understand it now is that there's this filtration system at the bottom of our brainstem that would allow in only what seems most important for our conscious brain to process, or even to be aware of, right? That's what makes it conscious. So if you imagine that at every moment we're having proprioception, what is going on around us? How are we in space? We are in front of me right now. There are probably 1,000 trees, and there's everything that's in my room, and there's Katie, and there's the conversation I'm having. If I had to be aware of all of that at once, it would overwhelm my system.
Yeah.
So this is helping to keep my system regulated. It's also helping to keep me safe. So if there's something wildly exciting, it's going to pull my attention over there. Or if you can imagine someone's having a conversation over to your left and you're talking to the person in front of you, and then suddenly someone says penis and your head turns. like something that totally catches your attention and you're just like, that seems interesting.
Oh my gosh, this literally happened on Monday. I was having lunch with a friend and we both just like pivoted to the table across from us. So it does happen.
I just thought like if any of your listeners were like falling asleep while I was talking, if I said that word,
bring them back.
Like, wait, what just happened? Did this just get really interesting? So another way that this works is if I say I want a red Jeep, then there's a really high likelihood I'm going to start seeing red Jeeps everywhere. And I'm going to say, oh my God, it's a sign from the universe, which surely it could be a sign from the universe. But I'm going to think it's a sign from the universe. But what is also happening is that now my subconscious, the reticular activating system, is now waking up to say, we are specifically looking for this thing.
Yeah.
And the reason why this is important is because if you go into something in life and you have just determined it is an all or nothing situation and you are stuck and there is no way out of it, then that is all of the information that your brain is going to look for. There's no way out of it. I'm going to look for all of the facts to back that up. I am so stuck. No one has ever been in this position like I've been in before. I am going to look for all of the details to back up how stuck I am. And I'm feeling like this and I feel victim and I need this to be true. I need, but if you begin to ask a question, my mentor uses a phrase, show me.
Yeah.
Show me a scenario in which these two things can be true, but there could be something even more beautiful that I'm not aware of yet. Like, you don't even need to say, show me the red Jeep, right? You don't have to say, like, show me the $1 million. It's just like, you could, in general, show me a more beautiful way. When I felt like I just couldn't get enough support as a mom, like, show me what it looks like to feel well-resourced. Show me the most beautiful people that could show up and really be stable and steady. Show me relationships that fill me up. And then without actively trying, I just start seeing that as a possibility, which, as I said earlier, the earlier the imprint of a certain pattern, the more impossible and dreamy and like, oh, that's nice for her, she can have that. And you come up with all the reasons why she can have it and you can't.
Yeah.
But when you start asking the question of like, show me my version, what would my version look like? What do I want anyway? I had to ask that question a few weeks ago when my husband was having all these peak experiences and I was feeling a little flat. And I was like, I don't even know what I don't even know what I want to do. Because when you just asked me the question before, I didn't mention anything about pleasure and joy. And so this is now more of an inquiry for me. 8 years into motherhood, like what would be like so joy filling for me? And so I asked the question. I didn't even realize I was doing this practice. I was just like, what
You
would
did, because
it
you
be?
actually told me about this
Yeah.
like a
And
week
then
ago.
a friend posted on Instagram, she was like, I want a friend, it's just a meme, like, I want a friend who would meet me in the Scottish Isles in a cabin and drink tea and paint or something like that. And I was like, I am so in. And she's like, let's do it. And then I totally forgot. And then a different friend of ours, a mutual friend, Janine Yoder, was like, I'm going on this retreat. And I totally forgot about the other conversation. And I wrote to her, I was like, that looks so awesome. She said, come. And I opened it up. I opened it up and my whole body started vibrating. And I have been in a phase in my life in which I've been holding, as you've heard even in this interview, the both and for everything. But this was just a hell yes. It was just like my body was so, and so there's a whole application process. And it's like, what about this trip are you feeling lit up about? What was it that you read on our site? And I was like, oh, I actually didn't read your site. I just felt a full body yes. And I know I have to do this. Like, I was just, when they're asking really specific details of like, what do you want to take away from this? I'm like, I literally just know that this is a yes. Like, I just know, and I know that whatever I'm going to get from it is more than I could imagine in this moment because it's not a reality yet. So whatever I'm going to get is beyond what I could ask for. And I also think that is part of mystical living, is living into the question and not reaching for it to be the answer you already think you want. Like, the answer is so much bigger and more beautiful than you could ever imagine.
Yeah. And this is so connected to, I had Philip Attar on for the kickoff of season 2. And you're just weaving, which you haven't listened to the episode because it comes out Monday, but you're weaving together this theme that I think is going to continue on throughout this season, is that when we get so caught up in the red Jeep, we actually hold ourselves back from the biggest miracles possible because we're so fixated on this one thing or one person, place, or thing that we.
I'm like, whoa, should I just get a full body? Like,
I
whoa.
know. You
Yeah.
gotta listen. This episode is, it's so connected. So everyone's got to listen to both because the weaving between them will make so much sense. But it's why I have a really sort of out there perspective on being anti-vision boards,
Mm.
because I believe that when we slap all these pretty pictures onto a board, we get so narrow-minded in our focus that we actually miss all of these other beautiful cars that are coming into our field. But we're so focused, like, no, 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 I want the red Jeep, the red Jeep, the red Jeep, the red Jeep. And we just completely miss what's being created around us. And I think it's also very connected to the card you pulled for
Yeah.
today. We both
Spirals of
pulled the cards.
manifestation. I will say something about that, but I'm laughing. So I just mentioned Janine's name, so I'll say it one more time. Janine Yoder was on my podcast. Katie was also on my podcast, so come listen to our conversation as well. It's called Threshold
Amazing.
Moments.
And Janine's coming
Um,
on. She's scheduled to come on Mystical Living at some point
yeah,
too.
she's so great.
Listen to all the
And,
places.
and we were laughing. I think somewhere on the podcast, she was like, there's a difference between following the breadcrumbs and taking out your own loaf of bread and trying to like put the path down. And
Oh
I
my
kind of
God.
heard that with like the red Jeep. It's like, and now I will
That's
do
so
this,
good.
and now I will do that. And you're like putting down your own breadcrumbs versus, again, as I've been the last 24 hours, what is mystical living is like,
Yeah.
oof, the courage to follow the breadcrumbs
Yeah.
instead of having to know where they are going to be.
Totally.
And I have always,
Oh,
people ask me, what's your 5-year vision? And I found out that I'm a non-specific generator. So I'm like, oh, actually, I don't need to fully know. I
I'm
just
a
need to have a
non-specific
feeling.
too.
So some people do
We
need
might.
something like very specific. And I would say if you need to have something very specific, I feel like I heard this back in like 2005 from Michael Beckworth. So I'm sure tons
Mm.
of people say it, which is this or something better.
This or something better. It's a
Right? Like
beautiful way.
the red
Yeah.
Jeep or something better. And you can always add in for the highest good of myself and all involved, right? Like you can really
Yeah.
like add in the elements, massage it in. But yeah, when you say this or something better, then you start to possibly see the red Jeep, but then maybe you see something next to it and you're like, oh, that's actually more me. I love this
Yeah.
because it has the elements of wildness and ruggedness that a Jeep has, but it's actually a little more luxurious inside and 4-wheel drive for
Totally.
snow. And, like you could like start to
Yeah.
like tease out, like, what do I actually want? Show me what I like want beyond what I could imagine right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just for those who are like, what's she talking about? Non-specific, specific. In human design, there are two types of manifestors. One is a specific manifestor, which is actually the majority of the population. And for a specific manifestor, we actually go through this in the Mystical Living Group program because I'm a big proponent of when we're doing it today in class. So I'm so excited. I'm a big proponent of understanding your human design, just like astrology or gene keys. We have access to all of these maps, but human design happens to be one that's a little easier, in my opinion, to understand than some of the cards of destiny, astrology, Vedic, or traditional, or, it gets kind of complicated. So, in human design, there's a lot, and we won't deep dive into all of it right now, but to talk about the manifestation types for a specific manifestor, thinking about that red Jeep and saying this or something better is really beautiful. And for non-specifics, like Sarah and myself, for us, it's really about that feeling that we want to cultivate. Like, how do I want to feel in my body in this next chapter, this next era I'm stepping into? And those are two tools you can use, whether or not you're specific or non-specific manifestor. So a little tangent there.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so helpful when,
Right?
a guest or host stops to specify something that is like between those people, it's like in their wheelhouse, and just to stop and pause. I had a teacher once who would say, if there was one person in the room who could benefit from a pause or from defining a little deeper and further, then it's of benefit for the entire room.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate taking that time. And it's also good for me to hear. And I'm looking over at Spirals of Manifestation. And I didn't read exactly what the book says on it. but I'm hearing of the different ways that we manifest. And I'm also thinking, this is off topic from where we thought we might go, but alas.
Here we
uh,
go.
Here we go. We're following the breadcrumbs instead of putting our own breadcrumbs down. Um,
Totally.
I'm thinking about how many times, and man, it happened so much in my 20s too, I'm thinking about when I was at the end of this road and I was working with professional athletes in Long Island, and I was renting a room out of this woman's house, and it was a really toxic house, but I was also had so much tone that like it didn't really get to me, but I would just on my time off, I would take my little convertible and go down to the water and read my book. And I looked out over this like long stretch of
Mm,
houses, and I just thought like, that must be so nice. And not like that would be nice or like I need to have that. It was just like,
I
oh,
know this story. It's so good.
that's so yeah, that looks really nice. I
Mhm.
wonder what that would be like. And no more than like a few weeks later, I was living in one of those houses. Um, my client happened to own like a whole row of them, and he was going off to Songdo to do work for many months. And he was like, "Oh, could you stay in the stone cottage," which was this big mansion. And I didn't know, because of the way that the roads took to get there, that that was actually the house that I had been looking at, like that those were the roads I had, until like a month into it. And I found this path down to the beach, and I was like, oh my God, these are the houses that I was looking at. And then I started feeling lonely for the first time in my life to live in this big mansion. I had no friends there. I was like new to the area. And I thought, I'd really love to. There's a guy, Chris, down the road who seemed pretty nice. I was like, I'd love to just like have a roommate and like pay rent that is like actual equal in relationship to where I'm living. And like the next day, the owner of the house was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. This person would love to rent the house. Any way that you can move out, you can move in with Chris, who is like down on the same." It was just like one of these things where I felt like whenever I had a thought that I was super unattached to, the
Yeah.
universe would be like, "Here you go." Um, I'm not sure that I see it as often. I'm sure it happens in little ways, but in my 20s, I felt like it just happened in these really obvious ways. I was like, oh, okay, got it.
And what you're describing is like the brilliance of being a non-specific manifester coupled with our detachment in our 20s because
Mm,
we like don't even know enough to try to force a manifestation at that stage in life. We're just like so free. We're in the moment. We're tradition. I'm sure it's different for everybody, but when I look back to that time, things were just materializing into my life in a
mm,
way that felt very free and flowing and easy. And perhaps this is an invitation for all of us to cultivate that energy of the 20s, of just the play and the delight and
mhm.
the magic and the freeness before many of us had kids and families and homes and mortgages, and bringing that frequency back in seems really juicy to me. So that's something I am going to feel into with you in this
Yeah,
next chapter.
I love that invitation. The way that I find my ability to detach from things now and dream
Yeah.
is through daydreaming. My
Yes.
daughter will stop and be like, "Mom, what are you doing?" And I'll just be looking at our house or looking at it or like and just
Yeah.
imagining the next version. And I feel so
Yeah.
unattached because I'm so grateful for what I already have. And it is really
Mm.
incredible the things that happen when I'm
Yeah.
daydreaming, really without attachment, really just for like, but
Mm.
I also hear your invitation back to the 20s. And I heard like the, for most people, and I'm thinking of those in their 20s, which is like really high loans and things that feel really
Yeah.
stacked and aren't feeling super free, and going back to the
Yeah.
imprint of like, it's never been that way. And
Yeah.
so this would be a great time for the reticular activating system
Yeah.
to say, what would it be like to have that free energy? And someone might say, well, that's never been mine. It could never be mine. What if
Mm.
it could be mine?
Yeah.
Like, what if all the other things are still true and I still have my
Yeah.
student loans or I still have my mortgage?
Yeah.
If it could be mine in any way, in the smallest way
Mm.
possible, what would it look like? I feel my legs tingling as I say this.
Yeah.
I know that this is the invitation that I need right now. I love that you named, because it was true for
Mm.
me that I really believed that I could make the amount of money I needed to live. I could also live in somebody's house, like in a room in their house, and live out of a bag and be so happy. So I would say, like, there were elements where it's just like, I need so little to
Yeah,
fill me up materially, and I
totally.
have so much passion for what I want
Mm.
to do. And right now, maybe there's a flip in that. And so inviting in that part of me in the 20s, and for anyone listening, just that archetype, whether or not you've
Yeah,
lived it or not, the archetype, what small doable piece would be
yeah,
possible for me.
yeah.
I'm like
Beautiful.
really into that. I can just feel my whole body. So thank you, Katie.
Me too.
I love even the way you named that, because I hadn't quite
Mm.
named it like that before, as to
Yeah.
why it may have switched a little bit for me from 20 until 41. Um, yeah. Thank you.
Totally. Totally. Um, as we close out this episode, I wanted to presence something that I've recently put a name to in my life, and I call it my Lotus Friends. And this clarity that arose in me presented visually like a lotus. And it's really what I've been cultivating in my life is friendships that can get into the muck with you.
Mm,
Like that as a lotus, like it needs to be in that mucky mud to blossom, but also friends that can hold us in our full bloom. You
mm,
know, the friends that can go with you to bail somebody out of jail in the middle of the night in the muck, and the
mm,
friends that can watch you from the front row and cheering you on as you're speaking on a stage to thousands of people. And there's so many versions of that in between. And I'm so grateful for you, your presence in my life, for being a Lotus friend, that I can get raw and honest and say the things I don't even really want to say out loud to myself in your presence. And I can celebrate the manifestation miracles and absolute joys with you too. And I wanted to presence that and just honor you and your beauty and your groundedness and the gift of sharing your voice, your medicine, your depth of knowledge. And we're going to have you back for another episode because we didn't even scratch the surface of possibilities.
let's
And
do another
as we
one.
close out, tell
Mm.
everyone like all the places they can find you and come into your world.
Yeah. So first, I want to say I sometimes love like a quick little like ditto for a really deep, beautiful. So actually, maybe first I'll say I really received what you said. I really received
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
And I know that I can be there in those ways for you. And I take such an honor that you open yourself to me in those ways. And I also, as you know, do the same with you. And I am always talk about having imprints of like what could be and moving into greater possibilities and updating. And I've just found, I thought like, oh, if Katie works with frequency, and what if I show up and I'm having big, ugly feelings, and the way that you receive me and say, actually, Sarah,
Yeah.
authenticity is the highest frequency, then I know that you can be with me no matter what I'm feeling and what stage I'm in. And so thank you as well. And where you could find me if you're listening is I also have a podcast, and it's called Threshold Moments.
And it's so
And
good.
it is so good. And it goes over nervous system and trauma resolution, but also really having people walk us through their journeys, and so that the listeners can feel accompanied, no matter if you are, as Katie said, like in the summer of your life on stage, or if you are in the muck of absolutely like, none of my tools are working. I don't know who I am in this place. Help. We kind of cover the whole spectrum there. And if you are looking to do any one-on-one work, to work towards self-liberation, freedom in your body, spirit, mind, you can go to sarahtacy.com and we could do one-on-ones together. And in the future, I will also have a group container. But for now, one-on-ones and podcast. Thank you, Katie.
Beautiful. And we'll put all the places to connect with Sarah in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you to everyone who spent the time listening to our deep conversation. I'm cherishing you. I'm beaming you so much love. Come connect with us on Instagram at mystic.katie.soul and on mysticalliving.co. And again, we would love to have you if all of this lit your soul on fire in the Mystical Living Group program too. I'm beaming you so much love and beauty today.